Gamers, Elden Ring just released, and as expected, a whole bunch of newcomers to the Soulsborne genre arrived with it. And unexpectedly, a great chunk of them suck, and complain about it on whatever social media platform you can name. There is only one way to remedy this distraught, and that is to petition for an easy mode. No, the answer is to get good, and today, Professor Sheen is about to teach you literally everything you need to know about becoming one with your inner gamer. To preface, all footage shown will be of areas accessible within the first 2 hours of gameplay. No spoilers beyond that. I will be covering how to transform failure to learning, how to recognize and learn enemy combos and general battle strategy, how to use items and game mechanics like rolling to your advantage, and finally learning when to take a break, with the conclusion just after that. The very first lesson is the hardest and most ingrained within all of our tiny ape brains, changing how we deal with failure. I am going to sound like the most generic guru you could ever find, but changing how you view failure will only quicken the learning process. That is all gaming is. It's learning. You learn how to maneuver, learn about the world you're playing in, learn about the combat, reading interfaces, enemy variety, everything. It does not matter. You are learning literally and figuratively all of the time. Make death a part of that learning experience. If you are slaughtered by a Knight Captain Spear follow-up slice, consider that move as a possibility every time a captain throws a combo at you. The first couple of times I faced my first captain, he was reinforced by a small platoon of soldiers. Not soon after, they all approached and left me knocking on the door of the nearest site of grace. How I learned from this mistake was to pick and choose my battles, and when to come in for a strike. How did I do that? Recognize combos and to determine the best course of action to counter them. It is as simple as it sounds, but it is not so easy in application, since not everyone has played video games since they were like 3 or whatever I was whenever I started. I will walk you through a mental process that I've developed over my years playing video games. It starts with learning what your character can do before knowing what your enemy can do. Before you perform any kind of action that involves a combination of inputs, like crossing a perilous, life-ending abyssal gap, you are required to comprehend your character's running speed and height or even type of jump. This small gap in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart will kill me if I mess this procedure up, but I don't have to worry because I am confident in the height and speed of Ratchet's regular movement. This exact same lesson translates NieR seamlessly into anything FROMSOFT makes. Get a feel for your character's speed and now in Elden Ring, jump capability. You do not need to understand how fast your character is moving, just whether you can move out of the way of whatever move an enemy throws at you. That is the very, very first step in learning an enemy's move list, determining your safe distance. How far you need to be to not get hit. The next step is to now factor in the time it takes for that move or that chain of moves to stop. I'm sorry if I am about to confuse or even frustrate you, but now, completely forget about the actual time elapsed for each combo that an enemy has. Instead, recognize the pattern in which that combo uses in format of. Typically, FromSoftware really likes 3-stage combos. All a stage within a combo is the individual move or moves that comprise a combo's runtime. And again, the actual time elapsed is not important. Only the stages within the combo. As you go on, your brain will naturally ossify this information and your gamer's third eye will engage shortly after you get a taste of getting good. Check this example here of me fighting one of the big boys right outside the first camp of knights. Its moves are long and drawn out but very high damaging. Here you see it running to me with its sword in tow, preparing for a game-ending swipe. The move is designed with a variable of player distance, meaning that it won't actually initiate its attack animation until either the player is within range, or if it reaches its maximum run distance threshold. You will see this template a lot in a multitude of different speeds and animation flair, but always, no matter what, unless you know 100% that you're outside of its range, like I am in this clip, be prepared to dodge. For this instance, ignore what I'm doing, rather look at the actions of Big Man. After it swipes, it continues through and orbits around back to me, and attempts to strike again. Then it runs right back to me again on the rebound and slams its sword into the ground. You can expect a 3-stage combo from nearly everyone, but this example is almost a hyperbole if we are being honest. Let's look at a more common example. This Knight Captain really likes to start his combo with the jab, and then if the player is still within range, a quick follow-up slice. This is a variable 2-stage combo. The secret to figuring out how to deal with it? Either avoid the first stab and stay away from him completely, or understand the timing between those two moves. A perfect segue for the second part of this section, and this could be the most important thing you learn all day: timing. When I cover utilizing game mechanics to your advantage, I will be covering timing again, but it will be in the form of when you should be rolling. This is learning the timing of when you should engage the enemy, before, during, and after a combo. Let's talk about when you should lay iron before combo initiation. There are two main points of entry when it comes to opening before a combo: poking and intercepting. When a target is preparing a strike, there is a wind-up animation nearly every time. Watch this clip of a foot soldier readying his spear for a powerful jab. I noticed prior that this wind-up animation takes quite a while for it to lead into the part of the move that actually hurts you. So I used a light attack from my sword to stop him in his tracks before he could let loose. That is called an interception. But hold on, what if he doesn't stop after I hit him? On this move, my attack did not stumble him, and he's about to make me wish I just paid my rent on time instead of asking for just one more month. This is called poise. All poise is a factor that determines whether an enemy can power through whatever attack you're throwing out. Note, this is not the same thing as hyper armor. That will be covered in the next section, where we talk about when to strike within a combo. For the foot soldiers, I noticed that some moves can be halted with a light attack, while others can only be halted with heavy or skill attacks. The only way to find out the winning solution is through experimentation. The same can go for most of everything on this guide, in fact. Experimentation leads to knowledge of what you are facing, and knowledge is progress to overcoming the opposition. Now let's talk about when you should be attacking within a combo. This technique can only really be used against a considerably smaller number of combo strings unless you have an attack laced with hyper armor. This is where your knowledge of what makes an enemy stagger during an attack come quite in handy. The best place to explain when you should do this is completely dependent on what kind of weapon you're using. Larger weapons like two-handers are going to have a much higher likelihood of staggering with a light attack than a one-hander. In fact, I would even bet on it that only the frailest of adversary would actually stagger mid-combo to a one-handed light attack. Again, it is 1000% determined on the experimentation you do beforehand. It is completely okay to get hit a few times if you are learning the limits of both yourself and whomever you're facing. Okay, but on to hyper armor. Hyper armor is a yes or no value applied to every single move in the game. While poise is a degree of what can be resisted before a stagger, hyper armor is a definite factor. Hyper armor will only occur mid-attack and is used to power through whatever attack is fighting against it. You usually gain an increase in defense during hyper armor segments and, again, become unstaggerable. Find what moves grant you hyper armor and capitalize on it amidst the onslaught of fury your opponent is currently dishing out. Now, how do you capitalize on one's move after they're done performing it? Frankly, it boils down to experimentation again. You're gonna hear that word a lot. Pay attention to how a combo or even a single move stops. There will always be a window of opportunity to strike afterwards. This is called the recovery frames. They are the number of animation frames required to get out of the move that a character just did. Start messing around and poking at whatever you're trying to kill. It really can be that simple. It is only up to you to learn how long you have until the next attack commences, especially since most enemies have a pretty considerably different moveset from each other. Timing is so very much important, and we are about to cover it again very soon from now when we get to how and when to roll. But for the moment, let's prattle on what kind of items and game mechanics you should be using if you're having a hard time even breathing with some of these monstrosities. Starting off with the absolute essentials, yes, I am about to state the obvious. Use your Flask of Crimson Tears to restore your health. When you should restore your health is dependent on the current state of whatever you're facing. If it is charging at you and raw and yearning, do not try to heal, obviously. Think back to the previous section on when you should attack before, within, and after an enemy's attack string. Treat healing the exact same way as you would attacking, because attacking or healing, you are utilizing an opponent's opening in their offensive. But now, how about your weapon of choice? Or whether you should use a shield or not? This is the easiest answer I can give you. Try everything that looks appealing to you and stick with what is fun. If one-shotting everything in a fell swoop is fun to you, go with the biggest sword you can find, whatever. If eccentric animations and over-the-top anime style is more your thing, go for something like unique weapons, or usually boss weapons. Or if you value range, use a spear. FROMSOFT has created for all of us an immensely dense open world chock full of weapon variety to suit almost every player's needs. But back to if you should use a shield. I personally don't use shields. That is only because I have beaten Bloodborne numerous times and have since discovered I value two-handing or dual-wielding weapons with exclusively dodging as my method of damage evasion. This does not make me better than anyone else. This is simply my playstyle. And if anyone else says otherwise, they are either making a point you should at least hear out, or they have an ego the size of the Erd tree. There is really no in between. Your playstyle is your playstyle, and that is perfectly okay if you want to use a shield. Use shields to your content. Hell, use them as weapons if you want to. It's what you find fun. In fact, I'd beg to say that FROMSOFT encourages blocking in Elden Ring with their new block counter system, so seriously, just experiment around and find the equipment you have most fun with. If a human-sized enemy is carrying a weapon you'd like to try, chances are farming them will eventually allot you their weapon. Take this partisan that I fished from the captain whilst grinding for his armor. I didn't even know that I wanted the thing, but now that I used it and got another partisan just by chance, I'm dual wielding them and it is just incredibly fun. And from no other reason than accrued experience, I developed an entirely different methodology to how I engage conflicts. To branch off weapon choice, let's discuss the properties of the vast selection of weapons in Elden Ring. Let's talk about weapon skills. I will tell you right now, I am basing most of my argument on my time playing Dark Souls 3, where weapon arts became very much prominent. Called the Ashes of War in Elden Ring, weapon arts are unique attacks that usually consume FP and are used to either deal damage or grant buffs to the user. Note, this is a gross simplification of the Ashes of War. There are simply too many in this game for me to cover each individual one and their uses. So let's keep it easy by explaining the utility behind the weapon arts of the Club, Partisan, and Lordsworn's Straight Sword. I specifically chose these three weapons for their ease of access at the beginning of the game and coincidental complete and utter differences of utility. Starting with the Club. Upon pressing L2, your character will yell at the very top of their lungs in what is called a barbaric roar. This is a skill with more than one use. Not only does it break the eardrums of both the player and your opponent, but you also obtain a damage buff that lasts so long as your character emits a red aura. But that is not all, actually. This skill also modifies your heavy attacks to be, in quote, a savage combo attack. But there's something else that the description fails to mention. Your character gains an immense amount of poise during the augmented heavy attack string. Unless a building is hurled your way, chances are you will be able to attack right through anything that comes your way mid-string. Incredibly useful for dealing with heavy hitters like the Captain. Our next weapon is the Lordsworn's Straight Sword. With the holding of L2, you are placed into a stance. From here you can opt to use an upward slash with R1 or a running upward stab with R2. Both moves deal massive damage, but don't be mistaken. With this weapon stance, light and heavy attacks do not exist. Instead, treat R1 and R2 as two different utilities that just happen to dish out more damage than the unstanced attacks. R1 is incredibly good with dealing with high poise and can knock one's blocking completely out, while the stabbing is great for intercepting charging enemies. The Partisan is a polearm class of weapon, meaning your primary method of attack is by stabbing, and the weapon art extremely exemplifies this. Dubbed Impaling Thrust, you can impalingly thrust your spear into any target of your choosing. This kind of weapon art is purely of the attacking variety. No stance, no buff, just a strong strike that is, in this case, will pierce right through the defense of anything it touches, even the Captain's Great Shield. Don't forget, this was just the Ashes of War for 3 weapons that you can get at the very beginning of the game. This does not include the fact that you can equip other Ashes of War that you find throughout the game world. Every weapon has their own skill, and if you don't like them, then change it. Seriously, that's it. But enough about weapons. I believe it is time to talk about something that is synonymous with everything FROMSOFT. Dodge rolling is nothing but a mechanic that lets you traverse a small distance in an invincible state. With the press of a circle button, your character will do a sick flip and evade absolutely everything that may be coming their way. The only catch, it requires time and stamina to complete a single roll. Grab your pencils, this one is very important. Now obviously you would roll to avoid damage, but also note that the albeit small distance you travel with a roll could be essential for creating distance between your foes. There are 3 types of rolls you can do right out of the gate: a light, medium, and heavy roll. What determines the roll you will do is your current equip load. Luckily for you, Elden Ring came equipped with an equipment monitor that directly tells you what movement type you currently have right underneath your equip load in your inventory. Me personally, I prefer a classic medium roll because that usually means that I have the armor that I want to wear with the weapons that I want to use. But what if you need more speed, distance, and increased invulnerability period? Then you want to go with a light equip load. My and most of everyone's advice would point to that you should never ever fat roll. This provides a considerable disadvantage to your movement, iframes, and usually the defensive trade-off is not even worth it. There is very little exception applied to this. There is actually one more type of rolling you can do. Not rolling. If you were to max your equip load all the way past your character's current limit, then you will not be able to run, jump, or roll at all. If you find yourself necessitating your current equipment that hard to where you prefer to no roll or fat roll, then I think it is time for you to learn about what you need to do to increase your current load limit. Like essentially every RPG, you can level up using the runes you pick up from defeating enemies. Learning what and when to level up comes with general practice, but it's a good thing I'm here to grant you some pointers. To start, let's go over the different attributes you can level up and what exactly they do. Vigor is what determines your maximum health, but increasing it also augments your resistance to fire and poison. Mind determines how much FP is at your disposal. FP is nothing else but mana in every single other game that uses magic. Mind also affects your focus. Focus is essentially your resistance to sleep and frenzy states. I have yet to face something that casts those status ailments on me, so I will not be showcasing an example. Endurance is what determines how much stamina you have and affects your overall robustness, which is a defensive stat much like Focus that determines your resistance to hemorrhage, which is just bleed, and frostbite status effects. But most importantly, Endurance increases your equip load, meaning after you upgrade it enough, you'll be able to don whatever you want to wear and use whatever you want to use. Strength is a damage-based attribute. The more strength you have, the more damage you will deal. Strength also increases your character's overall defensive stats, so be sure to increase it should you feel a bit weak to attacks. Dexterity is another damage attribute that focuses on nimble weapons. We'll get to strength and dex scaling in a little bit. Dexterity also determines how quickly you cast spells, how much fall damage you take, and how hard it is for you to get knocked off of Torrent. Intelligence is a magical damage attribute. Increasing this boosts your magical power and improves your overall magical damage resistance. Faith is another magical damage attribute, except it is for sacred incantations, rather than glintstone spells. And now, finally, Arcane. This governs item discovery, meaning your chances to find items upon kills goes up. Your holy damage defense, your vitality, which is a defensive stat that measures your resistance to the death status ailment, something I imagine will come way later down the line in a late game area. But okay, now let's talk about weapon attribute scaling. In short, strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith, and arcane are attributes that are used by a weapon's scale factor to grant you increased damage output. Let's take an example from one of my partisans. It has a strength scale of D and a dexterity scale of D, meaning that my current strength and dex level will only factor to my overall damage output quite minimally. You can see what attack power the partisan will have added to it right next to its current rated attack power. In this instance, my base power is 123, but with my strength and dexterity of 15 factored through my scaling rating of D for both, the amount of attack power added to my polearm is a meager 17. But you see what I'm talking about? Level scaling is incredibly important, and you could easily make or break your damage game later on whenever you're dealing with A's or even S's. But what about intelligence, faith, and arcane? Well, don't worry, it works the exact same way as strength and dex scaling, but it's just for magic. Increase those things, and in no time you'll be able to use that pretty new sword that you found. Wrapping it all up now, let's unwind a bit and take a break. And that's it. Take a break. These games are not meant to be blown through in one sitting or cheesed beyond recognition with a full multiplayer party. You will fail. You will die. You will get frustrated. You will lose your runes. And that is perfectly okay. If you can't make it past a boss halting your story progression, break off, do some farming, level yourself up. If levels aren't the issue, then seriously, turn off the game and ask some questions, preferably in my comment section, so the algorithm will push my video to more people like you, and get some advice from others who have been playing this genre for longer than you. I mean, really, just sleep on it. It 110% helps you. You know it was scientifically proven. Alright, you know, we got you, bro. Don't worry. The Souls community loves helping out new players and watching them succeed over the seemingly insurmountable odds that they once thought impossible. And remember, every single person sucked before they became good at something, and talent only goes as far as you assume it can. Okay? Good. You want a hug? I hope so, because I think it is time to call it a day, gamers. Thank you for not only seeking help instead of bitching about in easy mode, but for choosing this particular video. I am a tiny channel and would love nothing else but to get in the eyes of many more people, gamers, across the world. You know what I'm about to say. Kindly consider a like and a subscription, and if you really enjoyed yourself like I did making this video, and please don't knock sharing this thing to people, to players in need. Any bit of attention helps me currently. And if I get to guide just one more soul into the echelons of gamerdom, then that is a job well done in my eyes. I know they're kinda dead, but I am currently Let's Playing Elden Ring all the way from beginning to end. I ask you to come and watch. I put just as much effort into editing those as I do these essay videos, despite the fact they get considerably less views. But that's really about it for me. Thank you for sticking around to the very end. Of course, I'm just Sheen. I promise you. More good is to come. Have a good night.